Imagine one ordinary night, coming home after a long day, expecting the comfort of your marriage, only to discover that the person you've been sleeping next to, the one you trusted with your life, is a wanted fugitive. And the worst part? You're not just married to him. You're his cover, a pawn in a life of lies and crimes you never even imagined. My stomach turned. I felt like I might throw up. I tried to convince myself it wasn't real, that I was imagining it, but the evidence stared back at me like a mirror reflecting a nightmare I couldn't escape. You're probably wondering, how did I get here? How did someone so charming, so perfect on the surface, become the man living a double life that could ruin everything? Before we go any further, if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. Your support keeps this channel alive, and I can't thank you enough for joining me. Now let me take you back to the beginning. The day I met him, I had no idea he was already running from the law, weaving a web of deceit so complex that even the people closest to him didn't know the truth. At first, he seemed like a dream, the kind of man you think exists only in movies. Handsome, attentive, confident. But as I look back now, the first warning signs were there, hidden behind charming smiles and whispered promises that made me feel special. I didn't see them at the time. I wanted to believe in him. I needed to. Our courtship was fast, intense, and intoxicating. I remember the way he laughed, the way he made me feel like the only person in the world. Friends warned me that he seemed too perfect, but I brushed them off, telling myself that jealousy and suspicion clouded their judgment. Little did I know, he was constructing an image, a perfect mask to hide the chaos behind closed doors. Our wedding was everything I imagined, elegant, emotional, and full of love, or at least the version of love I thought I was stepping into. From the very first night in our apartment, there was something odd, almost imperceptible. Documents left lying around, a locked drawer he refused to explain, late-night phone calls he would suddenly end whenever I entered the room. I chalked it up to privacy, to nerves, to anything but the truth. The first real clue came a year into our marriage. I had come home early from work one day, planning to surprise him with dinner, only to find him frantically hiding a folder on his laptop. I froze. My pulse raced. Something inside me clicked. I realized there were secrets, big ones, and that I was somehow entangled in them. But I still couldn't imagine the full scope of what I was about to uncover. Then came the night that changed everything. I walked into our bedroom, expecting the usual quiet, only to find him on a call, his voice low and urgent, words I couldn't fully hear. I tried to retreat quietly, but he caught my glance. Panic flashed across his face, replaced instantly with that practiced calm he used so well. That's when I saw it. A brief, almost imperceptible notification on his screen. A wanted poster. My heart stopped. It was him. The man I married, the man I loved, the man I had trusted with everything, was wanted by the law. I wanted to scream, to throw up, to run out the door and never look back. But as the shock began to settle, something else took its place. A cold, sharp clarity. I realized that my entire life had been manipulated, that I wasn't just married to a criminal. I was his shield, his alibi, his cover. And the moment I understood that, a plan started forming in my mind. If he thought I was weak, if he thought I'd crumble, he had another thing coming. I spent the next few weeks observing him quietly, noting every habit, every slip, every fragment of information he left unguarded. He never suspected that I was paying attention, cataloging details, imagining the way I could use his own secrets against him. Every illegal transaction, every hidden asset, every relationship he kept secret, I stored it all. I didn't act rashly. I didn't yell or confront him. I needed patience. I needed control. The more I watched, the more I realized how fragile his world really was. One carefully placed move could unravel everything he had built, and I could do it without ever touching him directly. I would become the ghost in his perfect life, unseen, unheard, but absolutely unstoppable. Revenge doesn't need noise. It only needs precision. And by the time he realized what was happening, it would already be too late. And so, the quiet work began. Every late-night call I overheard, every secret meeting I noticed, became a piece of the puzzle. I didn't confront him, didn't let him see my fear or my knowledge. I stayed the loving, unsuspecting wife. The perfect cover. All the while I was building a map of his lies, a record of every crime and misstep, until I held the ultimate leverage. And when the time came, I would use it. That night, when I first saw the wanted poster, I realized something crucial. I wasn't just a victim. I was now a weapon. And the most dangerous part? He had no idea I knew. After the initial shock, I forced myself into a routine of careful observation. Every conversation he had on the phone, every email he left open even for a second, every detail of his schedule became part of my mental map. I had to learn how he operated, what made him careless, and most importantly, where his vulnerabilities lay. I had to understand the monster I was married to before I could strike. At first, it felt surreal, almost unreal. I would watch him from the kitchen as he paced during calls, pretending to be distracted by dinner prep. My hands shook, not from fear this time, but from anticipation. Each slip, each hesitation, each small piece of information he left behind was a brick I could use to build his downfall. And I realized that patience would be my greatest weapon. Revenge doesn't happen overnight. It's a game of quiet endurance, and I was ready to play. One evening, he left his laptop unattended for just long enough for me to notice a folder labeled with his old alias. My heart raced as I opened it. Inside were documents I had only heard whispers about: offshore accounts, fake identities, and contracts that implicated him in crimes I could barely fathom. For the first time, I saw the full extent of his empire of lies. And I understood something critical. This man, brilliant and careful as he was, had no idea that I could see everything now. From that night, I began to move with deliberate subtlety. I didn't confront him, didn't make noise, and never showed even the slightest hint that I knew. Instead, I quietly documented everything, cross-referencing details, making copies, and finding patterns. Each piece of information became a tool, a key that could unlock his carefully guarded world. I learned who he trusted, where he hid his wealth, and which people in his life could be leveraged without him even realizing. The thrill of control was intoxicating. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was orchestrating. I found myself anticipating his next moves, predicting how he would react to certain pressures, and I began planting seeds, small, seemingly insignificant actions that would grow into consequences he couldn't manage. A misdirected phone call here, a subtle hint to a business associate there, all carefully designed to tighten the net around him without ever revealing my hand. One night while he slept, I went through his personal files again. Hidden among contracts and invoices, I found a list of names, people he had crossed, people who could destroy him if they knew the truth. I realized that I didn't need to do the heavy lifting myself. With the right evidence in the right hands, I could let his world unravel quietly, systematically, and most importantly, without him ever suspecting me. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. For every lie, every manipulation, every moment he had treated me as nothing more than a pawn, I was preparing a response. But I had to stay patient. I had to keep the mask of the loving, unsuspecting wife perfectly in place. If he even sensed suspicion, if he caught wind that I knew, the game would change. And I couldn't afford to let him regain control. Over the next few weeks, I noticed cracks in his composure. He became more erratic, less careful, and in doing so, he exposed even more of himself. Each mistake fed the quiet plan I was crafting. I began setting small traps, emails sent with carefully hidden tracking, meetings scheduled to coincide with key witnesses, and subtle hints dropped to people he considered allies. Slowly, methodically, I was turning his own world against him. The most satisfying part was that he had no idea. He continued to believe he was in control, that his carefully constructed life was untouchable. But with every careless move, I was building a chain that would eventually bind him completely. I had become the invisible architect of his downfall, a ghost in the shadows manipulating everything with precision. And then came the first real opportunity. He had arranged a meeting with someone who had unknowingly become his weak link. I positioned myself as the perfect silent observer, noting every detail, recording every conversation without his knowledge. I realized then that the net I had been weaving was ready to begin its first real pull. One misstep, one carefully timed reveal, and the first domino would fall. By the time he realized the danger, it would be too late. Every move I had made, every detail I had collected, every patient observation would converge in a single moment of quiet, devastating justice. And I would remain unseen, untouchable, and victorious. Looking back, it's almost laughable how oblivious he was. The man who thought he controlled everything was blind to the fact that the person he had underestimated the most, the person he had treated as a pawn, was now the one orchestrating his unraveling. The calm, calculating patience I had maintained was a weapon more powerful than anything he could have imagined. And as I lay awake that night, planning the next steps, I knew that soon, the life he had built on lies and deceit would crumble completely, quietly, efficiently, and without ever touching me. I had discovered a truth more powerful than fear or anger. Patience paired with knowledge is unstoppable. And I was ready. The night had finally arrived. Every detail I had collected, every observation, every subtle trap I had set was ready to converge. I moved quietly, ensuring that nothing would tip him off. He went about his usual routine, completely unaware that the carefully constructed illusion of control he clung to was about to shatter. It was almost poetic. The man who thought he held all the power was blind to the fact that the strings he pulled were now in my hands. I began with the weakest link he had unknowingly exposed. One phone call, one carefully worded email, and suddenly, the information I had painstakingly documented began circulating quietly among the right people. I didn't confront him. I didn't make a scene. Every domino fell silently, but with devastating effect. Contracts were questioned, alliances fractured, and whispers began to grow into conversations he couldn't control. The satisfaction was subtle, almost imperceptible. But it burned hotter than anything I had felt before. Watching him scramble, attempting to regain control over a situation he never realized I had engineered, was almost intoxicating. Every move he made only tightened the grip I had around his life. He had underestimated me, underestimated my patience and cunning, and now he was paying the price. By morning, the consequences of his reckless choices were fully in motion. Key partners withdrew support, financial institutions began auditing accounts he thought were untouchable, and quietly, legally, his empire began to unravel. I stayed calm, composed, untouchable. The perfect mask of the loving wife hiding a dangerous mind. He never suspected that the person he trusted most was the architect of his collapse. It wasn't revenge in the dramatic, loud sense. No shouting, no confrontation, no police sirens outside our door. It was far more satisfying than that. Every misstep he made, every decision he thought was clever, played right into the network I had built. His life, once untouchable, was now vulnerable, and I was the silent force orchestrating the end of it. And then came the final touch. I ensured that the remaining evidence, the one piece that could finish the job, landed precisely where it needed to be. It was subtle, elegant, and irreversible. By the time he realized the trap, it was already too late. He had lost control, Not because I fought him openly, but because I had mastered the art of patience, observation, and quiet manipulation. Sitting in my living room that night, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. I didn't need applause. I didn't need recognition. I had turned betrayal into empowerment, lies into justice, and fear into quiet triumph. I had learned the most important truth of all. The person who underestimates you is the easiest to defeat, as long as you never let them see the hand you're holding. So now, as I sit here sharing this story with you, I have to ask, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Have you ever discovered a truth about someone you trusted that shattered your entire world? Would you have waited, watched, and quietly orchestrated revenge, or confronted them head-on, letting emotion dictate your moves? I want to hear your thoughts, your experiences, your strategies. Share them in the comments. I read every one. And before we close, if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that button. Your support keeps this channel alive, allowing me to bring more real, shocking, and emotionally intense stories like this one to you every week. Don't miss the next story. You won't believe the lengths some people will go to hide their darkest secrets. Remember, patience, observation, and control are often far more powerful than anger and noise. And sometimes, the quietest moves create the loudest consequences.